I do love Manchester, and it's also a bit like, it's like being in Glasgow, but with better weather. Better football, of course, as well, but that's another set of subjects. I'm going to talk about the future, and also about the big society. And I'm going to draw on particularly two projects I had the pleasure of creating and leading. One is, the first two were both with Demos, the UK think tank. The first one's called Scotland 2020, 11 project partners, and about a story in the future. And the second one was this one. This is still the website, even though the project ended, Glasgow 2020. We produced a book, The Dreaming City, Glasgow 2020, and the power. We invented the phrase mass imagination. We think, well, think tanks claim they invent everything. And we even did from stories a music album, The Dreaming City, which was just because we loved the stories, we decided to give 9 music artists choices of tracks to create music landscapes. It's jazz, it's ambient. I ended up emceeing it at Glasgow Jazz Festival, something I'd never done in my life before, and you know, it was great fun, and obviously completely, you know, horrible fearfulness in terms of introducing 7 acts musically on it, just like mini Live Aid, you know. So, journey into the near future. Obviously, everything I'm going to say is short, full of holes and simplifications, because I'm going to summarise very, very complicated things. I'm sometimes going to say, did I actually say that? And when I type up my notes from this, I'll give to the organisers. I'll put some links and suggested reading, just if there's anybody here who kind of, you know, wants to explore that, things about, you know, knowledge economy, or, you know, the carnage neoliberalism's done to the world. So I'm going to try to address anyway 3 things. How the government and institutions increasingly see the future and why that's a problem. Look at the kind of ideas of the world they're suggesting and the change implicit in that. And examine within that a little bit about the relationship to this term, the big society, the context of the public spending cuts, you know, and the uncertainty that we all live in and face. So firstly, again, very briefly and simply, apologies for this, the idea of the big society. Clearly, it's a problem term, it's confused, and it's window dressing. You know, there's confusion, is it, are we having this because of the cuts, are we having this because it's a good idea, what's the interrelationship? Yet, it's still, there is something in it, I think. It draws from traditional conservative pre-Thatcherite thinking, the little platoons, the conservative deep sense of localism, pre-Thatcher, or maybe even going back as far as pre-Heath. And it also draws from post-Thatcherism, this concept of red Toryism, which I think again is a you know, absolute kind of mushy set of ideas, and filled with contradictions. But Phil Blond, again, a kind of strange kind of character, I think, in lots of ways, has hit something here when he talks about being sceptical of state and markets, and talks about things like the perils of monopoly capitalism. When did you last hear someone mainstream talking about the perils of monopoly capitalism and the damage Thatcherism, along with, you'd argue, the 60s liberalism did to lots of values and tradition? I think the big society also draws on what is a pretty consensus of a critique of New Labour's command and control. To my mind, New Labour took command and control to the point of grotesque caricature, and that's despite the fact, coming from Scotland obviously, we got devolution, the Welsh got it, Northern Ireland and London, and yet within that, these were kind of byproducts of a profound command and control that existed. But also there were Scottish and Welsh versions of that as well in Labour. And I want to turn to this thing, the official future, which is a term we came up with in Scotland 2020, which is the way governments and kind of institutional opinion increasingly sees the world. It's their version of the future. And what we argued was it's increasingly become more and more narrow, inflexible, dogmatic, a profoundly ideological view of the world. It's jargonistic, it's a kind of soulless world, its language is once increasingly filled with terrible words, you know, like step change and drilling down, and, you know, things like Team Scotland and Team Manchester. We've all got to be pointing the same way in a, you know, a cause that we never actually debated we wanted to be part of or given a little choice. There's terms like modernisation, a word I used to use when I briefly thought of myself as a moderniser. And I think it's absolutely one of the fundamental problems here. intolerant about the old, but not just that, embracing a very, very narrow, certain sense of the new, a very narrow, instrumental new. You know, modernising the Conservatives is the new project, along with detoxing, modernising volunteering people talk about. And often, as is in the case of an ideology, not even realising they're talking an ideological position. A version of the economy, you know, Britain open for business is Cameron's mantra, Scotland open for business is Alex Salmond's as he pals up to Donald Trump. It's the knowledge economy, again another problem term, a term that confuses knowledge and information. You're not a knowledge worker if you work in Starbucks. Sorry if anyone is here working in Starbucks. You know, making that special latte isn't actually knowledge. You're following ingredients that were created, you know, in Seattle. Knowledge economy, to me, it seems the reverse of the Morning Star version of the proletariat, that everyone but Rupert Murdoch was a member of the proletariat. These are meaningless terms when they include everyone. The creative class, creative nation. A land of opportunity, a nation of classless, as Blair said, we are all middle class now, once, famously. And underneath this, a vision of globalization that I think, and this is a contentious point, that globalization, I think, took the language of a liberation movement. It says to the world, we took the Chinese rural people, when we were, you know, pulled them out of their houses practically, you know, out of poverty. We've taken millions out of Indian poverty. It poses as a movement of freedom and fluidity, and it's usurped a language that was, or said the left, thought were theirs. And you get Blair talking about this lots of times when he says, this 2005 Labour conference, the world is unforgiving of frailty, he says, no respecter of past reputations. It has no custom and practice. Now he's saying that unbelievably as a good thing, because he's talking the language of the winners, of the metropolitan classes of the world, the Richard Florida guff. You know, maybe some of you've read Richard Florida, The Rise of the Creative Class. As far as I'm concerned, a dreadful book about kind of winners, and you know, you can be lesbian, gay, you know, but as long as you're kind of part of, you know, you've got kind of spare cash to kind of be an active gay consumer. And a book adopted by regional development agencies all over the world. So, you know, you get Newcastle Gay Quarter designed by the council, you get everyone working out how many visible lesbian and gay groups they've got, or patents in a city and things like that. And Demos, bless them, did an index of, what was it, index of 40 British cities based on just, you know, aggregating some figures with Florida, which the Scottish story was, of course, Edinburgh heading above Glasgow, you know, and that was it, that's what we were interested in. This official future, how do you challenge it? You don't challenge it through facts. You don't challenge it through evidence-based policy. They're not interested. The UK is the fourth most unequal country in the developed world. Only United States, Portugal and Singapore are more unequal. This has happened to us in the last 30, 40 years and been done to us. They're not interested in that. London is the most unequal city in the developed world. That's good, isn't it? You know, London, the world city, which has a wonderful story underneath it, also has that undercurrent of something terrible in it. And the official future is a dogma. One way we defeat it, I think, one way we begin to subvert it is, I think, funnily enough, and again, this is slightly, maybe, you know, we can bat this about, is humour. Neoliberal is an earnest, fanatical view of the world. It's, in a sense, a kind of revolutionary movement. It's an inheritor in its style, tradition, even some of its beliefs, of the worst of the radical left. And there's even a link between neoliberals and neoconservatives and earnest ex-Marxists in Britain and America. And where it has some similarity, even more in content, is the sense that neoliberalism, you know, the market, fundamentalism, is the last modernist utopia standing. It's about people as playthings, it's about human nature as pliable. We're all consumers, the only way we are visible is through shopping or through our purchasing power. That's how we see ourselves. And even, I think in many ways, there's an element, some element of play in that. You know, I don't want to think all shopping is bad. I like shopping, but it's not a lifestyle. It can be everything. And two quick points here is, I think in terms of humour, the caricature of the left as, you know, Dave Spar. I don't know how many of you remember Dave Spar, how many of you don't remember Dave. Dave Spar was invented in the 1970s. He still lives in the pages of Private Eye. And what it did was it took the mickey out of the earnest lefty revolution. We're revolutionary. And it still has resonance to this day, unbelievably, despite what we've been through, because people know those characters. I have been guilty of Dave Spartism with friends, you know, by being over-earnest and lecturing them at points, you know. And my dad was a Dave Spart before Dave Spart, you know. And I think one of the things we need to do is we need to create caricatures
characters, names and stereotypes of the neoliberal age. These people are ripe for taking the mickey out of, the people that talk the jargon, the consultants that don't believe anything, the people who have kind of a worldview. They would do business in any dictatorship in the world who say, oh, people go on too much about Chinese, human rights abuses or something, or China's getting more open to the West, those sort of things. And secondly, again, coming from Scotland, we've produced a whole pile of books on Scotland in the last decade. I'm guilty of about half of them, And so we call them a kind of devolution industry. And I've increasingly begun to realise that the books that influenced me in that last 10 years aren't any books about politics, history, social, they're not the serious books. The books that influenced me are the books about, and are original, about play, humour, surrealism, and kind of subversiveness. And one of them is this guy called, maybe some of you have heard of him, he's a singer-songwriter from Paisley, who now lives in Berlin, called Momus. And he wrote a book published by an obscure German publisher last year called The Book of Scotland. And the Book of Scotland has over 150 parallel Scotlands in it, past, present and future. Some of them are literal and believable. Alan Lomax, who collected world music, comes to Scotland in the 50s, that sort of thing. And decides to launch a Scottish health education campaign on, and in fact the Scots are masturbating too much. That's highly plausible, highly plausible. But other ones are absolutely, utterly magical that take you into another dimension. There's one where the Black Swan, the story of the Black Swans being, do Black Swans exist? A huge Black Swan comes and it decides to inhabit and live over South Ayrshire. So the South Ayrshire people hate it at first because it smells, then they decide to tie it to them. So it doesn't go because they start a tourist industry based on it, and then the whole thing dies and suffocates South Ayrshire. And I mean, what a story is that? I mean, I have no idea what it's about, but it's something not of the mainstream, and yet it's got some connection to Scotland at this moment and where we are. Challenging the official future, I think, if it's not through facts, it's partly through humour. The main way to explore it is through story. Now, the official future is a story. The biggest discussion we had in Glasgow 2020 was the official future a story. I should say this project, which is a crazy project, was sponsored by every single public agency in the city and Scotland, which is 20 public agencies, because this is one way we challenge the system. We don't build a barricade. We gently, touch their toes and say, let's do something different, and then you go and do something crazy once you get the money. And we had a great relationship with the City Council on that, with the leader Stephen Purcell before he blew up in a drug scandal, etc. Even got UK coverage. We had a great relationship with the council, which obviously are part of the problem, part of the solution. The official future is a story, and also the people in the system, some of the most deep recesses in the system, even use innovative processes like storytelling, all sorts of participative things. So you can't just use story as a good. You can't just use innovative processes as a good. The people in the system are up to following what you're up to, what we're all up to. They are smart. That's why they've brought power and privilege around them. But we need to explore ways of telling a different story, of I think using that to democratise and remake and retake the future. Story is fundamental to being human, and at the moment, in a way, there is only the official future as a story. And I think, where does this take us? I think in the climate we're in, we face personal challenges, we face economic and social challenges, we face institutional challenges, and we profoundly face